Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, stepped out of a black car that had quietly parked near the entrance of the luxurious office building in the city center. She was dressed in an elegant dark gray suit, the star of her profession, always on top of things despite the constant stress and the workload that weighed on her shoulders. Her dark hair was neatly styled, her gaze penetrating yet calm. Everything around her, from the building to the person in the hallway, seemed to be part of a huge machine where every movement had its purpose. The interview, which was about to take place in just a few minutes, was important. Karoline was to answer questions about the White House's new initiatives and key moments that had recently dominated the headlines. The journalist waiting for her in the conference room was experienced but very assertive. She had a reputation for asking questions that evoked real emotions. Karoline was ready. She knew that in her role, she often had to do more than just be the face of the government. She also had to find ways to keep her composure in the face of difficult requests and criticism. "Welcome, Karoline," the journalist said, extending her hand. "Thank you for making time for this interview." "Always happy for the opportunity to speak," Karoline replied, shaking her hand and smiling, though she already felt the internal tension building with every passing moment. The journalist sat down, opened her notebook, and looked at Karoline over her glasses. "Let's start with the hottest question," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Lately, the media has been actively discussing the White House's response to criticism on social media, especially after one incident that became widely discussed. How do you assess the administration's response?" Karoline, without blinking, looked directly into the journalist's eyes, answering evenly and confidently. "We believe that criticism is a natural process in a democracy," she began. "It's important to listen and learn, even when the words are painful. We're working to ensure that all our actions are based on the principles of fairness and supporting those who need help." The journalist leaned forward, flipping through pages in her notebook. "So you believe that enough support has been given to those who need the state's attention the most?" she asked, subconsciously trying to delve deeper into the topic. Karoline took a deep breath and responded, her voice remaining calm, though not without a hint of concern. "This is a complex question, and we are trying to address it with all available resources. Sometimes the process takes time, but the result is always worth the effort. One must not forget that every step is part of a larger effort, and we are gradually changing the situation for the better." It seemed that every word she spoke was carefully considered, every movement measured, but it was in this atmosphere of calm that an invisible tension lingered. The journalist took a brief pause, as if assessing every word spoken. "I can't help but ask, Karoline, don't you think that some of the administration's critics might see your words as just superficial promises? Is there anything you can share that will truly change the situation?" Karoline looked the journalist in the eyes, her gaze growing even firmer. She knew this question could be a trap, but instead of dodging it, she chose the path of honest but careful explanation. "I understand why this question arises. And I also understand why some may doubt our efforts," she said slowly. "But our actions should not be limited to words. What we do in practice will, over time, show what we are capable of. No one expects immediate changes, but small steps have great significance." The journalist looked at Karoline carefully, and in her eyes flickered a gap between professionalism and doubt. But it was at this moment that the conversation took a turning point. Karoline was not just defending a position. She was engaging in dialogue, making each reply a step toward understanding. The conversation continued, and with each question, both sides slowly opened up to one another, dispelling stereotypes and offering hope for real change. Every word from Karoline sounded confident, but with a deep awareness that true change does not come quickly. Only one question remained. Would she really be able to change the situation, or would she just continue the fight against what seemed like an invisible barrier standing in the way of real change? The journalist, sensing that her questions hadn't had the desired effect, began to change her tone. Her gaze became more challenging, and her words sharper, as if she had decided to put Karoline in an uncomfortable position. "You know," she began, a slight smile playing on her lips. "It's so sweet when people in your position try to talk about small steps and change. But don't you think your steps are just endless promises that never turn into reality? Maybe it's time to change tactics and simply admit that there's nothing real in all of this? People don't believe these beautiful words anymore, and I suppose you're not even interested in why that is." Karoline froze for a moment, trying to maintain her composure. The journalist didn't stop. "What exactly are you doing in the White House? Do you really believe you can change anything, sitting in these comfortable offices and making political promises? It's probably just a good career for someone who can't see the consequences of their decisions, isn't it?" Each of her words grew heavier, like sharp thorns digging into the soul. It seemed that the journalist wasn't just asking questions, but trying to undermine Karoline's very essence, making her doubt herself and her role. Karoline struggled not to lose control. Her hands tightened slightly, but her voice remained calm and steady, though her gaze had grown colder. "You have the right to ask questions, but I ask you to leave your personal insinuations out of this conversation," she said calmly but firmly. "If you're interested in real facts, I am happy to provide them." The journalist didn't back down. She smiled, continuing her game. "Oh, of course, facts. Maybe we'll hear your beautiful speech about change again, but everyone knows that people like you never actually do what you promise. You're just part of this mechanism where everyone moves only for themselves, right?" Karoline took a deep breath. The conversation was becoming more tense, but she didn't allow herself to relax. She knew that such trials could be part of the game, and she was ready for it. The journalist, seeing that Karoline hadn't broken under her attacks, decided to continue her game, intensifying the pressure. She smiled even more boldly, as if sensing she was cornering her conversation partner more and more. "So, you're trying to convince us that all this politics, all this beautiful rhetoric really brings change? Or maybe you're just trying to hide your true face. The same White House that knows how to promise mountains of gold, but in reality only disappoints. You can't even look at ordinary people who have long lost faith in anyone in power." Karoline felt her heart race slightly, but her face remained unmoved. She understood that this attack was just part of the manipulation. The journalist was trying to provoke her, test how far she would go with her answers. But Karoline was ready for this. Instead of responding with aggression, she decided to firmly state her position once again, not giving room for further speculation. "You have a right to your opinion," she said, slowing her speech just enough so each word was clear. "But let's understand one thing. Change doesn't happen overnight, and even in the most difficult situations, we are working to achieve results. Yes, it's hard, it's not always visible, and it's not always immediate, but it's a process. And we are all part of that process, even if it's not always convenient." The journalist raised an eyebrow, as if not expecting such a response. She paused briefly to gauge Karoline's reaction, but there was no doubt or hesitation in Karoline's words. "Maybe so, but don't you feel that this process has long been stuck in its own trap? You, just like your colleagues, always look away when real problems appear. Your changes look like yet another delay." Seeing how fiercely she was being attacked, Karoline felt a cold determination rise within her. She couldn't allow herself to break under such pressure. Instead of reacting to aggression, she focused on something more important, her mission. "Maybe I don't have all the answers," she said with a gaze full of resolve, "but I won't back down. And that's more important than any criticism. Problems exist in every system, and we have to work through them, not search for quick fixes. I understand that you want immediate answers, but change is never easy." She paused between words, giving each one a chance to leave an impression on the journalist's thoughts. "And what you see is only part of the reality. I'm not promising that everything will be perfect, but I promise that we won't stop on our path to improvement." The journalist lowered her brows slightly, almost disappointed that her attacks hadn't yielded the result she had expected. She once again resorted to a mocking tone, hoping to approach it from another angle. "Oh, of course, you won't stop. But the truth, Karoline, is that everything you're doing just supports the old game. Political games with no end. You're working to support the system, not change it. Are you ready to admit that?" Karoline looked at her again, without emotion, simply observing. She knew that behind each question, there was more than just words. It was a fight for respect, for trust, for the right to remain herself even in the most difficult situations. "Maybe you're right, but I won't back down. Sometimes even a small step can change the direction of a great current." The journalist looked at her in surprise. These words left a mark in her mind, though she tried not to show it. The journalist, slightly unsettled by Karoline's responses, decided to change her tactics. She couldn't afford to lose this game, so she decided to continue, but now with a subtle hint of trying to bring the conversation to a more personal level. She pretended to reflect on Karoline's words, but was actually looking for new ways to manipulate her. "I see you're holding firm to your beliefs," the journalist said, smiling, but with an even more mocking tone in her voice. "But let's be honest, Karoline, isn't this just another attempt to withstand pressure? Your ideas look good on paper, but in real life, don't you feel like your surroundings are still pulling you back, like you're literally trying to stay afloat in a system that can't change?" Karoline felt the journalist's words trying to hit her directly in the heart, attempting to sow doubt. She took a deep breath and forced herself to remain calm. This was not the first attempt to make her appear weak. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she repeated, maintaining her confidence. "And the system always has its obstacles, but that doesn't mean we should give up. I know your job is to question every little thing, and that's valid. But we need to work together, even if it's hard." The journalist furrowed her brow and chuckled a little, but her laugh was more mocking than friendly. "Well, if you think so," she continued, "then I must have misunderstood you. It seems like you're saying if I just keep asking questions, everything will get better sooner or later. Really? And all of this at the expense of us sitting here in this small office, while you talk about your big plans." Karoline could feel her patience reaching its limit, but she knew that if she lost control now, she would lose this battle. She decided to keep everything on her side, maintaining her composure and defending her position. "No, I'm not saying everything will change instantly," she said calmly. "But I believe that everyone who works for change has the right to do so. And if we all start taking action and looking for real ways to improve, we can change the system. We can't just wait for a miracle. We have to create that miracle with our own hands." The journalist was still dissatisfied, but her persistence was beginning to wane. She took a short pause to collect her thoughts and steer the conversation in another direction. "Maybe I'm just being too skeptical," she said, changing her tone slightly. "But understand, many of us no longer believe that change is possible. People are starting to feel that it's all just an illusion. And you, Karoline, aren't you afraid that your stubbornness with these ideas might clash with a reality that's much harsher than you imagine?" Karoline felt the weight of this remark hit her like a heavy stone. She knew what the journalist meant, and her words made her think. But her mind was not ready to retreat. She couldn't let doubts creep into her convictions. "Yes, reality can be harsh, and I'm not afraid of it. My goal isn't to avoid difficulties, but to face them and try to change at least something for the better, even if it's hard. Your job is to doubt. Mine is to move forward. And maybe we won't agree, but I'll still act." Each word she spoke was like a challenge to the journalist, and she now understood that this interview was definitely not going to be like the others. She had to find another way to get Karoline to react, to give her something that would allow her to end this meeting with a win. "Well then, Karoline," the journalist said, pausing, "we'll see if you can really stand firm when we face what's coming around the next corner." Karoline felt the pressure from the journalist mounting, but she didn't let herself break. The response she gave was already on the edge of self-control, but there was still determination in her voice. "If your words about the future are meant to scare me, it won't work," she said coldly. "I'm ready for any challenges. I know I'll face difficulties, but that doesn't mean I'll stop or change my principles." Seeing that Karoline hadn't broken, the journalist began to realize it would be difficult to achieve her desired effect. She decided to continue her game, but slightly changed her tactics. Instead of just pressing, she began asking questions designed to uncover even more of her weaknesses. "Oh, yes, I understand. You're ready. But let's look at reality," the journalist continued, her voice becoming even more manipulative. "Why do you think so many people who try to change the system end up in its embrace? You see how quickly all these great ideas disappear when they face the same reality we're trying to ignore here." Karoline felt her patience starting to wear thin again, but she decided this time not to give her the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. "If we let the system dictate our actions, we'll never change anything," she replied confidently. "I believe change can be made from within. And even if it takes a long time, I'll walk this path. It's better to try than to give up just because it seems like everything is already decided." The journalist, though impressed by the response, couldn't stop. She was curious where this would lead, and she felt that even if she didn't break Karoline, her story could be more interesting if she could show her how hard it is to hold onto beliefs in such a world. "Aren't you afraid that your determination will lead to disappointments? Do you realize how often people who start with big ideas end up alone when they can't find support?" Karoline took a deep breath and looked at the journalist again, trying to see the real motive behind her words. She realized that this moment was no longer just an interview. It was a battle where every word could influence the outcome. "If I end up alone in my beliefs, that will be my choice. I understand that many will abandon my ideas. But if I keep them inside and don't try, then I'll certainly change nothing. You have the right to doubt, but I'll keep moving forward." The journalist watched closely, observing how Karoline still held her ground. She understood that breaking her wouldn't be easy, and this only fueled her desire to deepen the interview. But she also felt that there was something more here than just a fight for victory in the discussion. "All right, Karoline," she said, pausing. "Maybe I underestimated your determination. But, sometimes even determination doesn't help when it comes to real change." Karoline stayed silent for a few seconds, as if evaluating how to respond properly. She knew this might be her chance to take the conversation to a deeper level. "I understand your skepticism," she said quietly. "But sometimes, to change the world, you have to change yourself first. And that's not an easy path." The journalist nodded, but in her eyes, it was clear that she was ready to continue the fight. She knew that this interview could become more interesting and sharp, and in reality, Karoline wasn't just an interviewee, but a real challenge. "I'm interested in your path ahead," she said, hiding a smile behind her professional expression. "Maybe you're right, but will you really be able to make changes when you have to make tough decisions?" Karoline gathered all her strength, and although the interview was becoming more difficult, she was not about to back down. A calm glimmer appeared in her eyes, signaling that she remained steadfast in her beliefs. The journalist, who had initially tried to mock and belittle her, now noticed how much the atmosphere had shifted. "Do you really believe you're capable of this?" the journalist asked, trying to break through the last bastion of her confidence. "I believe in change, even if it's difficult," Karoline replied, her voice now clear and resolute. "And even if I can't change the world on my own, I'll know I tried. I believe that step by step, something can be changed. I'm ready for all challenges, even if they are tough." The journalist fell silent for a moment, her gaze becoming less aggressive, more attentive. She saw before her not just someone seeking a career or fame, but a true fighter, someone searching for their purpose in life. This was the moment when she realized that she hadn't been able to break Karoline, and perhaps even began to admire her determination. And although the interview didn't provide clear answers to all the questions, it brought one important truth. People who believe in themselves and aren't afraid to follow their own path can not only change their lives, but also inspire others. Karoline approached the end of the interview, leaving behind a quiet victory. The journalist looked at her again, no longer with a hint of sarcasm or aggression. "Thank you," she said quietly, impressed by her resilience. "I've really been watching you. You're an interesting person." With these words, Karoline left the room, not knowing what awaited her next, but confident that she had already taken an important step toward change.